You've thought about writing a book for your business. And somewhere underneath that, thought there's a quieter one, which is, does that actually do anything? Or is it just a thing entrepreneurs say they're doing? My name is Jacob Ratliff. I'm a professional book coach, and I've helped dozens of coaches, experts, and founders write books that build their credibility and help them attract new clients. And I want to start by giving you a number because nobody in this space ever does. You'll hear that a book is your business card, that it's six-figure authority, that it's the ultimate lead magnet. All of that gets said with enormous confidence and no figures attached, and I think that's why a lot of people who should write a book never do. The pitch doesn't sound credible, because it isn't. So here's my ledger, and then we'll get to the part that's actually about you. I published a book called Client Attractor. In the first month after it came out, I signed 4 new clients. I'll be careful with that number, because a launch month is a noisy month. I was talking about the book. I was emailing about it. Some of that would have produced clients anyway. Second number, and this is the one that surprised me. My average sales call went from about 50 minutes to about 20. And third, I started getting speaking invitations, which hadn't been happening before. Now the unimpressive half of the ledger, because you should have it. It did not sell many copies. Most business books sell in the hundreds. Mine is not an exception, and the royalties are not a number worth saying out loud. If you're writing a book to make money from the book, I'd reconsider. That's a hard, crowded business, and it isn't the one you're in. And it wasn't passive, and it wasn't fast. A book that exists and nobody knows about is a document. It only becomes an asset once people actually have it. So that's the evidence: 4 clients, 30 minutes off every call, some invitations, a few hundred copies. But my numbers aren't the useful part, because you're not me, and your book isn't mine. What's useful is why those things happened, because the mechanism transfers even when the numbers don't. There are 3 of them, and if you understand them, you can predict whether your book will do this or not before you write a word of it. Mechanism 1, a book does the explaining before you show up. This is the whole reason those calls got shorter, and once you see it, you'll see it everywhere. Think about what a sales conversation actually contains. Some of it is genuinely about them, their situation, their timeline, their budget, but a big chunk of it is you, giving the same talk you gave last week. What your process is, why it works, what makes you different from the person who quoted them half your rate. That talk is identical every time, and you're delivering it to somebody who hasn't decided yet whether to believe you, which is the hardest possible conditions to deliver it in. A book moves that talk earlier. The prospect arrives having already heard it, at their own pace, in a format where you got to be thorough. So the call is about them. And here's the thing that decides whether this works for you. The book has to contain your actual argument, not your expertise. Most business books are a summary of what the author knows. Those don't shorten anything, because knowing things was never the objection. The objection was always whether to believe you, and a list of what you know doesn't answer that. Here's how to tell which one you've written or which one you're about to write. Take your table of contents and read it as a stranger. If it reads like a syllabus, Chapter 1, the fundamentals, Chapter 2, the history, you've written the expertise version. If it reads like somebody building a case, you've written the argument. And I'll tell you the uncomfortable version of this. The expertise book is easier to write. It's just what you already know, arranged. The argument book requires you to decide what you actually think, which is harder and slower, and is the reason the second one is worth something. Mechanism 2, a book is what lets somebody else vouch for you. This is the speaking one, and it's the least obvious of the 3. The person booking a speaker is not really deciding whether you're good. They're deciding whether they can defend choosing you to somebody else, a committee, a boss, a sponsor, an audience that paid to be in the room. She's very knowledgeable is not defensible. It's not checkable, and it doesn't survive being repeated by a third party. She wrote the book on this as a complete sentence. It ends the conversation, and it gives them something to put in the program. Same thing happens with referrals, and this is worth sitting with if you get most of your work that way. your referrals currently travel about as far as somebody can carry your reputation in their own words, which is not far, and it degrades every time it's passed along. A book is the version of your reputation that doesn't degrade because it's the same book every time. That's worth thinking about if you've noticed your referrals plateau. Most experts hit a ceiling that has nothing to do with how good they are. It's just the edge of how far their reputation can travel by word of mouth, which is usually 2 people deep, and then it's gone. Mechanism 3, a book is the only asset that works when you're not in the room and nobody's algorithm gets a vote. Everything else you do to be found is rented. You post, and a feed decides who sees it. You run ads, and they stop the day you stop paying. You do a podcast tour, and it's a good month, followed by a normal one. A book is a thing that exists. It keeps being findable. Somebody discovers it 2 years after you wrote it, and it works exactly as well as it did on launch day. Now, I'm not saying don't do the other stuff. I run ads. But there's a difference between the things you rent and the one thing you own. And most experts have a lot of the first and none of the second. And the rented stuff has a specific cost that's easy to miss, which is that it resets. Every morning you start at 0 and you feed it again. Whereas the thing you own accumulates. Somebody finds it in year 3, and it does the same work it did in week 1. And you weren't there, and it didn't cost you anything that morning. Now, all 3 of those mechanisms have one requirement underneath them, and it's the thing I'd want you to take away, even if you forget the numbers. None of it works unless somebody finishes the book. I know how that sounds coming from a book coach, but be specific about it with me for a second. The call that went from 50 minutes to 20 went that way because somebody read the whole thing. If they'd put it down in chapter 2, that call is still 50 minutes. The person who invited me to speak had read enough to stake their own credibility on me. Every one of those outcomes required somebody to get to the end. And this is where I'd push back on how books get sold to business owners. When you hear marketing asset or business card or lead magnet, you start optimizing for the thing existing. Get it done, get it up, post about it. But nobody finishes a lead magnet. A book only does any of this if it's genuinely worth somebody's evening. And that is a completely different target than getting it published. So here's what has to be true. 4 things, and you can check your idea against them right now. 1, it has to be about the thing you actually sell, not adjacent to it, the same problem your clients pay you to solve. I nearly wrote a different book, a better book, honestly, about writing. It would have been a worse business asset because the people who read it wouldn't have been the people who hire me. If your book is about your passion and your business is about something else, you'll get a lovely book and no clients. And you'll conclude that books don't work. The check. Finish this sentence. Somebody who reads my book and loves it should then want to hire me for blank. If that blank is hard to fill, the book and the business have come apart. 2, it has to take a position. There are hundreds of books about whatever you do. Yours needs to argue something specific that a reasonable person in your field could disagree with. If nobody could disagree with it, there's nothing to change anybody's mind about. And changing their mind is the entire mechanism. A book that everyone nods along to shortens no sales calls because it moved nobody. The check. Say your central claim out loud to somebody in your field and watch their face. If they say that makes sense, it's too safe. If they say, hang on, you've got a book. 3, it has to be findable, and you have to keep saying it exists. Longer than feels comfortable. Well past the point where you're bored of your own book. Your audience did not hear you the first 4 times. And I want to be fair about this one because it's the condition people find most tiring rather than most difficult. You don't have to become a marketer. You have to mention the thing in the places you already talk. That's it. But you do have to keep doing it after you're sick of it. And most people stop at about week 3. 4, it has to be finishable, which means it needs a shape before it needs sentences. And this is where almost everybody dies, not on the writing. On the fact that they started writing before they knew what the argument was, So chapter 6 is serving a different reader than chapter 2, and nobody gets to the end. That's the one that made me stop just writing my own books and start doing this. The check on that one is brutal and it takes 10 seconds. Say what your book argues in one sentence, not what it's about, what it argues. If you can't, you don't have a shape yet, and every word you write before you have one is a word you'll probably cut. One more thing on timing, because nobody's honest about this either. The 4 clients came fast because I pushed. The speaking came later, and it came from people who'd actually read the thing, which takes as long as reading takes. So if you write a book and month 2 is quiet, that's not failure. That's just the shape of it. So 4 clients, 50 minutes down to 20, some invitations, and a few hundred copies nobody should care about. But the number isn't the point. The mechanism is. A book explains you before you arrive. It gives other people something to vouch for. And it keeps doing both without anyone's permission. It isn't a business card. It's the argument you'd make on every single call. Made once, properly, so you never have to make it again. Tell me in the comments what you'd want yours to do. Speaking, inbound, shorter calls, something else entirely. I read them. And if you've got the material and no shape for it, that's the 4th condition, and it's what stops most people. The reader, the premise, the chapter map, all on one page. That's the 1-hour book blueprint. First link below, built to be finished in an afternoon.